At 77, Ted Kennedy is dead. 47 years in the United States Senate, the third longest tenure ever. For essentially all of my adult life, Ted Kennedy sat in Washington, his hand involved in the formulation of American policy. And to be honest with you, as a conservative, I think that that long career was largely damaging to the interests of our nation. In the half-century of Ted Kennedy's prominence, America's lurch towards socialism has been dramatic and almost complete, and he has been a leading player in that move. So politically, I disagree with what he stood for. Historically, I think his legacy will be long and negative. But personally, I can't help but respect a man who lost 3 brothers in the service of the United States. His eldest brother killed in combat in World War II. His brother, the president, assassinated while on duty. His brother, the senator, killed while campaigning for the presidency. That's a heavy burden for any family and for any man to carry. Ted Kennedy lived most of his life in dissipation. He made some very poor personal choices and paid a very high personal price for it. But in the latter years of his life, he seems to have found a personal peace and to have been able to continue with the long-term political focus of his life. He was often referred to as someone who would cross party lines to work with Republicans. By my observation, every time that occurred, it was because the Republicans were compromising on their values and were moving over his liberal position. I think that Ted Kennedy felt a certain obligation to the poor and disadvantaged. He was a man who actually never had to work a day in his life, and outside of government service, he actually never did work a day in his life. And yet, as the kid brother of 2 great men, elevated to the Senate out of kindness to them, he found a way to advance what he believed in. And so, if there is a look back on his great life, it must be that he was satisfied with it, that he used many years and many opportunities to advance the things that were important to him. As a conservative, I am not a believer in his legislative record, but I recognize that there are many Americans of a different philosophical bent who will treasure the contribution he made. To them, and most significantly to his family, I extend my condolences. I do not personally believe that Ted Kennedy was a great man, but I do recognize without a doubt that he was an historic man. He was, as I look at it, the last vestige of an era in the early 1960s when this country absolutely loved the Kennedy family and all that it stood for. Over 2 generations, he adapted what he stood for and who he was to the circumstance around him. In 1980, the Democratic Party denied him the one thing he sought more than all others, the opportunity to follow his 2 brothers as a candidate for President of the United States. It was thought in the years before that Ted Kennedy would, without doubt, one day be a president. That did not take place. The Democrats instead went with Jimmy Carter. And if it's any consolation, I think history will show us that the impact of Ted Kennedy on this nation is dramatically larger and of greater significance than that of Jimmy Carter. Again, I have opposed what Ted Kennedy stands for virtually all of my life, but I can't help at this time of sadness for his friends and supporters recognize the steady presence he was and the undeniably historic figure he was. There are probably few leaders arising in our society who will serve as long or become such a distinctive American flavor. Ted Kennedy has passed away, and to all who are touched by that, I offer my sincerest condolences.